Our story begins in 1952 in the city of Cardiff, the capital of Wales, one of the 4 countries that make up the United Kingdom and one of its largest cities. Cardiff is a coastal city located by the sea, and at the time it had a large port that was considered an important commercial hub. Most of its residents were sailors from diverse nationalities and cultures. On the evening of Tuesday, March 6, 1952, there was a woman named Lily Volbert, 42 years old. She had never married. Perhaps fate had not been kind in that regard, but she was a strong and hard-working woman. Lily ran a small shop, more like a general store or a local supermarket, where she sold almost everything: clothes, cigarettes, daily necessities. Her family members, her mother and her niece, helped her run the shop. The shop was located on a street called Dock Street, in a neighborhood popularly known as Tiger Bay, though its official name was Butte Town. People referred to it as Tiger Bay because of the many bars and nightclubs in the area, which were a popular destination for dock workers and visiting sailors. The neighborhood was close to the docks, and it was home to immigrants from all over the world: Somalia, Yemen, and Eastern Europe. But unfortunately, the police did not view the residents favorably. Why? Quite simply, racism. Because of skin color, accents, and cultural differences, the area was often placed under surveillance, or worse, deliberately neglected. That night, Lily, her mother, and her niece were sitting in the small back room of the shop, a space used for rest and meals, just behind the inner door. They were quietly having dinner. The time was around 8 p.m. Suddenly, a small bell rang, a bell placed near the cash register to alert the people in the back when a customer entered. Lily stood up and said to her family, "Stay here, I'll go see who it is." But she didn't return. 5 minutes passed, and still no sign of her. Then the bell rang again. Her mother assumed it was another customer, but she wondered, why would the customer ring the bell again? She reassured herself, thinking, maybe he didn't see her, and she'll handle it. The person who entered this time was a young man from the city, a sailor named William Archibald, 25 years old. He was on his way home, and seeing the shop door open, decided to step in and buy a pack of cigarettes. He walked in quietly, reached the counter, but saw no one. He rang the bell, but no one answered. He took a few steps forward into the shop, and there, behind the counter, he saw a horrifying scene. Lily was lying face down on the floor, covered in blood. William ran to the nearest police station to report what he had seen. Meanwhile, in the back room, Lily's mother and niece were still calmly eating dinner, unaware of what had happened to her. Minutes later, William returned with several police officers. Lily's mother heard movement and voices outside. She sensed something wasn't right. She stepped out to see what was going on, and the moment she did, she was shocked by the sight. Her daughter was lying on the floor, soaked in blood. Murdered. Lily had been killed just a few meters away from her family in what seemed like a completely ordinary moment. She stepped out to greet a customer and never came back. The question that remained unanswered: who was the first customer, and why did he kill her? Was it robbery, hatred, racism, or something else entirely? Lily Volbert was quickly rushed to the hospital, followed by her family, who were in a state of hysteria, shocked by what had happened to her. The case was assigned to an investigator named Harry Power, and it was immediately clear that Lily had been the victim of a brutal act of violence. The detective confirmed that the killer had used a sharp razor blade, most likely an old-fashioned one, the kind used before modern Gillette blades, as a deep gash was found across her neck, which had caused her death instantly. What was particularly strange was that no one heard her scream, not even a sound, despite her mother and niece being in the next room eating dinner. There were no cries, no signs of struggle. This led the investigator to believe that the killer had completely surprised her, and she likely had no chance to defend herself or even call for help. It was also notable that the killer did not steal anything of significant value from the shop, except for a small amount of cash from the register. Lily was known for being extremely cautious and never kept large amounts of money in the store. This was further confirmed by the testimony of one of Lily's assistants in the shop, a woman named Dorothy Brown. In her statement, she said that she finished work that day at 6 p.m. and left. She confirmed that Lily was always very careful with handling money and was afraid the shop might be robbed. She also avoided being alone with unfamiliar customers. If several customers entered and one of them was a stranger, she would make a point to serve that person first and get them out quickly, then deal with the others she already knew, so that she wouldn't be left alone with someone she didn't trust.
Detective Power deduced that the young sailor William Archibald, who discovered the crime, had entered the shop just moments after the murder had occurred. The time gap between the two bell rings, first when Lily went to greet the customer and second when William entered, was no more than 5 minutes. This prompted the investigator to ask William, "I need you to remember clearly everything you saw that day, from the moment you walked in until you left." William responded, "When I saw Lily lying on the ground, blood everywhere, I immediately ran to the police station. It was nearby, just at the end of the street. The street was almost deserted, but I do recall seeing a man. He was dark-skinned, around 30 years old, maybe Somali. He wore a dark jacket, had a mustache, and stood about 5.5 feet tall." This testimony led the police to focus their investigation on this mysterious man. They began a wide-scale search across the city, especially in small hotels and among Somali sailors in particular. A few hours after the crime, a street cleaner in the area reported seeing a pile of clothing in an alley near Lily's shop. He claimed the clothes appeared to be stained with blood. Police rushed to the location, but they found nothing useful. The clothes were scattered with no visible bloodstains, but they did find a leather belt with a slot designed to hold a knife or dagger. Still, the police pressed on with their investigation, questioning dozens of sailors who were docked at Tiger Bay Port over the next 2 days, hoping to identify the mysterious suspect. Meanwhile, Inspector Harry Power began constructing a theory of what had happened. Lily likely heard the shop bell and left her backroom meal to attend to the customer. It seems that she recognized the person, or at least didn't consider him a threat, so she wasn't overly cautious. The inspector later learned that Lily used to gather the shop's weekly income and deposit it in the bank every Wednesday. The murder took place on a Tuesday evening, the day before the deposit, which meant the store likely held its largest amount of cash. The detective estimated there were around 150 pounds in the till at the time, equivalent to about 7,000 USD today. He also noticed traces of blood on the edge of the cash drawer, which was now completely empty. This strongly suggested that the killer, most likely that same dark-skinned man, took the money with blood-stained hands, implying the stolen bills might themselves be stained with blood. At this point, the inspector ordered the police to search every bar, nightclub, and nearby shop in the city. They questioned everyone they could, asking, "Have you seen a tall Somali man spending large sums of money? Were any of the bills stained with blood? Was he throwing money around carelessly?" The police began combing the streets, street by street, especially around Tiger Bay, on the trail of a mysterious Somali face. He might have been the last person to see Lily alive, or perhaps he was her killer. Through the course of the investigation, suspicions began to center around a man named Mahmoud Hussein Matan. His name appeared repeatedly in police reports, making him a person of interest to the authorities. Mahmoud was a 29-year-old seaman, tall, slender, and living in Cardiff's docklands. He was known among locals by the nickname Shadow. So quiet he bordered on mysterious, his voice rarely heard, moving lightly and swiftly, like a shadow slipping through the alleys. He was originally from Somalia and had come to Cardiff in pursuit of maritime work. His journey had taken him from Aden to Bombay, then on to Suez, until he eventually settled in Cardiff, in an area known as Tiger Bay. There, he married a woman of Welsh descent, but the marriage was not well received by the local population. Mahmoud and his wife faced harsh racism, not just for the color of his skin and his foreign accent, but because he had married a white woman, something that sparked indignation among many. How could a black man marry a white woman? Over time, Mahmoud left his work at sea and began bouncing between odd jobs, rarely holding one for long. Sometimes he found work, other times he remained unemployed. That's when the police decided to place him under surveillance. During that period, he was caught red-handed stealing a raincoat from a shop on a rainy day. He simply didn't have enough money to buy something to keep him dry. He was arrested and put on trial for theft on March 15th, just 9 days after the murder of Lily Volpert, the victim whose case had shaken the city. The police requested that the judge keep Mahmoud in custody for reasons related to an undisclosed investigation. The judge agreed without hesitation. Meanwhile, Inspector Harry Power was piecing together the evidence and identified 2 witnesses who claimed to have seen Mahmoud Matan on the same street where Lily's shop was located on the very night of the murder. The first witness, Harold Cover, testified that he saw Mahmoud leaving the shop at 11:28 p.m., just about 5 minutes before William Archibald entered and discovered the crime. The inspector hypothesized that Mahmoud might have been still inside the shop when William arrived, hiding until he left, then slipping out unnoticed.
The second witness was a woman named Mary Gray, owner of a second-hand clothing shop. She stated that Mahmoud came to her store between 11:38 and 11:58 p.m. to purchase clothes. Initially, she assumed he had no money based on his humble appearance, but he surprised her by pulling out £100, a considerable sum in those days. She also mentioned that he seemed as if he had been running or was in a hurry. Though Mahmoud remained in custody for the theft charge, the investigation began focusing heavily on his possible connection to the murder. During questioning, he firmly denied being anywhere near Lily's shop that night, insisting he had been at the cinema until 7:30 p.m., after which he returned to his home on Davis Street in the Tiger Bay area. Further digging revealed that Mahmoud was a habitual gambler, involved in everything from horse racing to poker. Sometimes he even borrowed money to support the habit. When police searched his shoes, they found 2 blood stains, one large on the right shoe, a smaller one on the left. It was confirmed to be human blood, but its source and age remained undetermined, and no link to the victim was ever established. Suspicions deepened when the landlord of Mahmoud's residence informed police that Mahmoud had spoken to him the night of the murder about Lily's death, describing it in detail as if the killer had grabbed her from behind, pulled her by the hair, and then slit her throat with a razor. The description closely matched the theory Inspector Harry Power had developed, which only fueled his belief that Mahmoud was the murderer. Based on these findings, the decision was made to charge Mahmoud Matan with murder and bring him to trial, despite the lack of any direct physical evidence linking him to the crime. The case relied solely on circumstantial evidence, observations, and witness testimonies, all of which were potentially disputable. When presented to the court, Mahmoud maintained his innocence. When asked if he wanted a lawyer, he responded with surprise. "A lawyer? Why? I did nothing wrong. I don't need a lawyer if I'm not guilty." In court, the prosecutor told the jury that the testimony of Harold Cover, who saw Mahmoud near the shop, and Mary Gray, who saw him with a large amount of cash shortly after the murder, were sufficient to convict him, especially considering his gambling habits and losses that night. The defense, however, was weak. Mahmoud's own lawyer described him as primitive, with a childlike mind, incapable of fully understanding the consequences of his actions and simply unlucky to be caught in the web of suspicion. The defense argued that the shoes had been second-hand and the blood could have been there before Mahmoud even acquired them. The police had found no weapon, no stolen money, and no blood traces in his home. As for the landlord's testimony, it could have been exaggerated or misinterpreted. The defense also pointed out a key detail. William Archbold, the man who discovered the body, described seeing a black man with a mustache, while Mahmoud was clean-shaven. His wife testified that he had been home by 8 p.m. on the night of the murder. Mahmoud repeated his account to the court. He had gone to the cinema around 4:30 p.m., left around 7:30 p.m., returned home, and had not gone near Lily's shop or Mary Gray's store. He explained that he only had £2 that day from social benefits, which he had used to bet on a dog race. After 58 minutes of deliberation, the jury reached its verdict. Mahmoud Matan was guilty.
He was sentenced to death by hanging, as mandated by British law at the time, which recognized no other punishment for murder. Yet the verdict stirred widespread unease, particularly among Mahmoud's family. The case had no conclusive evidence, and the entire prosecution was built on assumptions and inferences, hardly enough to justify an execution, especially if the man was innocent. On the morning of Wednesday, September 3, 1952, at exactly 9 a.m., Mahmoud Matan was taken from his cell in Cardiff prison to be executed by hanging. The day before, he had even been denied the right to pray, until, at last, he was granted permission in a scene marked by silence and gloom. In the prison yard stood his Welsh wife, Laura, and their 3 children, David, Omar, and Mervyn, all waiting for the moment of execution. Laura, his wife, never lost hope until the very last moment and did everything she could to stop the execution, but all her efforts were in vain. Mahmoud was led to the gallows, his hands bound behind his back and his head covered with the black hood. The sentence was carried out, and Mahmoud was gone forever. But his story did not end there. Years after his execution, his case became the subject of wide public debate in the media, especially following attempts by Cardiff MP Ted Rowlands to reopen the case. However, the then Home Secretary James Callaghan, who would later become Lord Callaghan, rejected those efforts, stating there was no justification for revisiting the case. In 1971, a newspaper published an interview with Officer Harry Power, who had been in charge of the original investigation. In the interview, Power claimed that Mahmoud Matan had intimidated some shopkeepers who paid him out of fear, describing him as a fierce and frightening character. He added that the conviction had been based on the best circumstantial evidence available at the time, while also admitting that the case had been built on inferences and assumptions. Despite all this, Mahmoud Matan's family remained convinced of his innocence. They made repeated efforts to clear his name, knowing that the stigma attached to the accusation would haunt them and their descendants. "Your father is a murderer" isn't much different than "you are the children of a murderer." It's an accusation that does not die with the accused. Ultimately, after decades of struggle, the family succeeded in reopening the case. On February 28, 1998, new evidence was presented before the Court of Appeal. That evidence revealed that some of the witnesses at the original trial were unreliable. One such witness was Harold Cover, who was later found to be unstable and violent. In fact, he was convicted in the late 1960s for attempting to kill his daughter. He had changed his statement multiple times, initially claiming to have seen a Somali man named Tahir Gas at the crime scene, but later, during the trial, saying it was Mahmoud Matan he saw. Ironically, this change in testimony was never communicated to the defense attorneys at the time. Tahir Gas, first mentioned in the case back in 1952, was a Somali sailor who had arrived in Cardiff in 1949. He was known for his strange behavior, often carried a knife, and was nicknamed the Mad Somali. He had been evicted from the boarding house where he lived after failing to pay rent and had threatened the landlord with a knife, prompting police intervention. In 1954, Tahir committed a gruesome murder of a man named Grandlil Jones, whose body was found near a stream, stabbed more than 30 times, ears severed, and throat slit. A knife belonging to Tahir was found near the body, along with a coat whose inner pocket bore his name. Upon arrest, he displayed signs of severe mental illness, claiming to be the son of the King of Somalia, and that he had killed thousands in World War II. The court deemed him insane, and he was later deported to Somalia after spending time in a mental institution. In 1998, during the review of Matan's case, it became evident that Harold Cover's description of the killer more closely matched Tahir Gas than Mahmoud Matan. Cover described the perpetrator as tall, thin, and with a gold tooth in the upper jaw, features that did not apply to Mahmoud. The gold tooth belonged to Tahir, which proved Cover's testimony was false and shed light on the manipulation of evidence during the original trial. In light of this new evidence, the judge declared that the conviction of Mahmoud Matan, issued 56 years earlier, was void, and that the man was innocent. The judge stated during the hearing, "The death penalty is the harshest of punishments, yet it is a decision made by human beings, and humans make mistakes. It is unfortunate that this mistake cost an innocent man his life." And so nearly half a century after the execution, justice was finally served. Mahmoud Matan was officially exonerated, becoming the last person to be executed at Cardiff Prison before the death penalty was abolished in the United Kingdom. Throughout his trial, and up until the moment of his execution, Mahmoud kept repeating, "I am innocent. I didn't do this." But no one believed him, except his family, who stood by him to the very end, and 46 years later, they restored his name and his dignity. Perhaps the lesson in his story is that we must not believe everything we are told, nor condemn anyone without conclusive evidence, for people's lives should never be subject to guesswork. May Mahmoud Matan rest in peace.